Welcome to another session of random Wikipedia article. But before I jump into this, I want to make sure that my recording or live streaming is kind of clear because while editing some of the backend thing, I observed that there were like some sound issue and some of the technical issues. So I want to verify that. And right now, I have no other means other than doing this like this. Okay, I think it's fine. All right, perfect. So, what are we doing here? Well, we will be traveling through the sea of wikis, and these wikis gonna either inform us of something new, or will help us to kind of verify our existing understanding of that particular wiki. Whereas the wiki itself means like an article written in HTML, I guess. But basically, a wiki is a collection. A wiki is a single article which could be modified by anyone within the community. And that's exactly what Wikipedia is, which is a collection of these wikis. And these wikis, which could be modified by anyone, have a lot of interesting articles or information about a specific topic, and that helps us to understand some of the aspects of that particular topic. And that's why I'm picking random Wikipedia article, because it is community based, so it seems more living on the line of wisdom of the crowd, and that helps us to kind of minimize the amount of misinformation we can learn. Uh, that being said, we're gonna start our today's journey. So, and in fact, you can do this too. Like go to Wikipedia page and click on this random article on the left hand side and learn something new. And today we will be learning about Megalorhipida dubiosa, which is a species of moth in the genus Megalorhipida. 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 And that genus is from Brazil. Males in this species have a wingspan of about 10 millimeters, which is 0.39 inches. Moths of this species fly in September. The specific name dubiosa refers to doubt over the validity of these species. So, Megalorhipida dubiosa is a species of moth, and moths are a paraphyletic group of insects that includes all members of the order Lepidoptera, which that are not butterflies. With moths making up the vast majority of the order, there are thought to be approximately 160,000 species of moth, many of which have yet to be described. Whereas Megalorhipida is a genus of moths in the family Pterophoridae, described by Hans Georg Amsel in 1935. Species in this genus are distributed in pantropical and subtropical climates. The species typically nest on host plants in the families Nyctophoridae Nyctaginaceae, Amaranthaceae, Fabaceae, Goodiniaceae, I guess. All right, so they belong to the kingdom of Animalia, which are animals. And animals are multicellular eukaryotic organisms in the biological kingdom Animalia. With few exceptions, animals consume organic material, breathe oxygen, are able to move, can reproduce sexually, and go through an ontogenetic stage in which their body consists of a hollow sphere. Arthropods are invertebrate animals having an exoskeleton, a segmented body, and paired jointed appendages. Arthropods form the phylum Arthropoda. They are distinguished by their jointed limbs and cuticle made of chitin, often mineralized with calcium carbonate. And insects are pancrustacean hexapod invertebrates of the class Insecta. They are the largest group within the arthropod phylum. Insects have a chitinous exoskeleton, a three-part body, three pairs of jointed legs, compound eyes, and one pair of antennae. Lepidoptera is an order of insects that includes butterflies and moths. About 180,000 species of the Lepidoptera are described in 126 families and 46 superfamilies. 10% of the total described species of living organisms. It is one of the most widespread and widely recognizable insect orders. And the Pterophoridae or plume moths are a family of Lepidoptera with unusually modified wings. Though they belong to the Apoditricea, like the larger moths and the butterflies, unlike these, they are tiny and were formerly included among the assemblage called Microlepidoptera. Megalorphida is a genus of moths in the family Pterophoridae, described by Hans. Oh, we already went this. We already went through this. I'm kind of curious about the binomial name and the scientific classification because this would be really good to know. All right. In taxonomy, binomial nomenclature, also called binomial nomenclature, binomial nomenclature, or binary nomenclature, is a formal system of naming species of living things by giving each a name composed of two parts, both of which use Latin grammatical forms, although they can be based on words from other languages. Huh. I hope there is some sort of logic in the naming convention. With that, I mean the one named using Latin grammatical forms. And in biology, taxonomy is the scientific study of naming, defining, which means circumscribing, and classifying groups of biological organisms based on shared characteristics. Organisms are grouped into taxa, and these groups are given a taxonomic rank. Groups of a given rank can be aggregated to form a more inclusive group of higher rank, thus creating a taxonomic hierarchy. Okay, so taxonomy, which means arrangement and method. Okay, so in biology, taxonomy, which means ancient Greek taxis, which means arrangement, and nomia, which means method. So arrangement method is a scientific study of naming, defining, and also circumscribing. In biological taxonomy, circumscription is the content of a taxon, that is, the delimitation of which subordinate taxa are parts of that taxon. If we determine that species X, Y, and Z belong in genus A and species T, U, V, and W belong in genus B, those are our circumscription of those two genera. I still have no idea what that means. Okay, so basically classifying based on shared characteristics. All right, organisms are grouped into taxa, which in biology, a taxon is a group of one or more populations of an organism or organisms seen by taxonomists to form a unit. Although neither is required, a taxon is usually known by a particular name and given a particular ranking, especially if and when it is accepted or becomes established. Taxonomic rank. In biological classification, taxonomic rank is the relative level of a group of organisms in a taxonomic hierarchy. Examples of taxonomic ranks are species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, domain, etc. Okay. Groups of a given rank can be aggregated to form a more inclusive group of higher rank, thus creating a taxonomic hierarchy. The principal ranks in modern use are domain, kingdom, phylum, which is nothing but division, is sometimes used in botany in place of phylum. Okay. And then there is class, order, family, genus, and species. The Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus, wait, Carl Linnaeus is regarded as the founder of the current system of taxonomy, as he developed a ranked system known as Linnaean taxonomy. Linnaean, 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 Linnaean taxonomy for categorizing organisms and binomial nomenclature for naming organisms. Okay. So in biological taxonomy, a domain, also dominion, superkingdom, realm, or empire, is the highest taxonomic rank of organisms in the three-domain system of taxonomy devised by Carl Woese in 1990. In biology, a kingdom is the second highest taxonomic rank, just below domain. Kingdoms are divided into smaller groups called phyla. Traditionally, some textbooks from the United States and Canada use this system of six kingdoms, while textbooks in Great Britain, India, Greece, Brazil, and other countries use, I don't know, maybe not six kingdoms. In biology, a phylum is a level of classification or taxonomic rank below kingdom and above class. Traditionally, in botany, the term division has been used instead of phylum, although the International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi, and Plants accept the terms as equivalent. In biological classification, class is a taxonomic rank, as well as a taxonomic unit, a taxon, in that rank. Other well-known ranks in descending order of size are life, domain, kingdom, phylum, order, family, genus, and species, with class fitting between phylum and order. In biological classification, the order is a taxonomic rank used in the classification of organisms and recognized by the nomenclature codes. The well-known ranks in descending order are life, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Family is one of the 8 major hierarchical Family is one of the 8 major hierarchical taxonomic ranks in Linnaean taxonomy. It is classified between order and genus. A family may be divided into subfamilies, which are intermediate ranks between the ranks of family and genus. The official family names are Latin in origin. However, genus is a taxonomic rank used in the biological classification of living and fossil organisms as well as viruses. In the hierarchy of biological classification, genus comes above species and below family. In binomial nomenclature, the genus name forms the first part of the binomial species. In biology, a species is the basic unit of classification and a taxonomic rank of an organism, as well as a unit of biodiversity. A species is often defined as the largest group of organisms in which any two individuals of the appropriate sexes or mating types can produce fertile offsprings, typically by sexually reproduction. Carl Linnaeus, also known after his ennoblement as Carl von Linné, was a Swedish botanist, zoologist, taxonomist, and physician who formalized binomial nomenclature, the modern system of naming organisms. He's known as the father of modern taxonomy. Linnaean taxonomy can mean either of two related concepts. Number one, the particular form of biological classification set up by Carl Linnaeus as set forth in his Systema Nature and subsequent works. Cool. So moving on with advances in the theory, data, and analytical technology of biological systematics, the Linnaean system has transformed into a system of modern biological classification intended to reflect the evolutionary relationships among organisms, both living and extinct. The exact definition of taxonomy varies from source to source, but the core of the discipline remains the conception, naming, and classification of groups of organisms. As points of reference, recent definitions of taxonomy are presented below. Number 1. Theory and practice of grouping individuals into species, arranging species into larger groups, and giving those groups names, thus producing a classification. Second, a field of science and major component of systematics that encompasses description, identification, nomenclature, and classification. Number 3, the science of classification. In biology, the arrangement of organisms into a classification. Number 4, the science of classification as applied to living organisms, including study of means of formation of species, etc. Number 5, the analysis of an organism's characteristics for the purpose of classification. Number 6, systematic study, phylogeny, to provide a pattern that can be translated into the classification and names of the more inclusive field of taxonomy, listed as a desirable but unusual definition. Okay. Biological systematics is the study of the diversification of living forms, both past and present, and the relationships among living things through time. Relationships are visualized as evolutionary trees. Phylogenes have two components, branching order and branch length. A phylogenetic tree is a branching diagram of a tree showing the evolutionary relationships among various biological species or other entities based upon similarities and differences in their physical or genetic characteristics. All life on Earth is part of a single phylogenetic tree, indicating common root. The very definition either places taxonomy as a sub-area of systematics or invert that relationship to appear to consider the two terms synonymous. There is some disagreement as to whether biological nomenclature is considered a part of taxonomy or a part of systematics outside taxonomy. For example, definition 6 is paired with the following definition of systematics that places nomenclature outside taxonomy. Okay, they are getting into weeds of definition because, of course, it is actually categorized that definition. So, systematics is the study of the identification, taxonomy, and nomenclature of organisms, including the classification of living things with regard to their natural relationships and the study of variation and the evolution of taxa. I want to check out this. Taxonomic characters are the taxonomic attributes that can be used to provide the evidence from which relationships, which is the phylogeny, between taxa are inferred. Kinds of taxonomic characters include morphological characters such as general external morphology, special structures, example genitalia, internal morphology like anatomy, embryology, karyology, and other cytologic factors. And then the physiological characters include metabolic factors, body secretions, genetics, sterility factors, whereas the molecular characteristics include immuno, immuno, immunological distance, electrophoretic differences, amino acid sequences of proteins, DNA hybridization, DNA and RNA sequences, restriction endonuclease analysis, other molecular differences. And then there is behavior characters, which includes courtships and other etiological isolating mechanisms and other behavior patterns. Talking about ecological characters, which includes habits and habitats, food, seasonal variations, and parasites in host. And finally, geographic characters, which include general biogeographic distribution patterns and sympatric allopatric relationship of populations. There are different kind of taxonomies. So there is alpha and beta taxonomy, not to be confused with alpha diversity. In ecology, alpha diversity is the mean species diversity in a site at a local scale. The term was introduced by R.H. Whitaker together with the terms beta diversity and gamma diversity. Whitaker's idea was that the total species diversity in a landscape is determined based on a lot of factors. All right, the term alpha taxonomy is primarily used today to refer to the discipline of finding, describing, and naming taxa, particularly species. In earlier literature, the term had a different meaning, referring to morphological taxonomy and the product of research through the end of the 19th century. William Bertram Tyrrell introduced the term alpha taxonomy in a series of papers published in 1935 and 1937, in which he discussed the philosophy and possible future directions of the discipline of taxonomy. There is an increased desire amongst taxonomists to consider their problems from wider viewpoints, to investigate the possibilities of closer cooperation with their cytological, ecological, and genetics colleagues, and to acknowledge that some revision or expansion, perhaps of a drastic nature, of their aims and methods may be desirable. Tyrrell has suggested that while accepting the older, invaluable taxonomy based on structure and conveniently designated alpha, it is possible to glimpse a far distinct taxonomy built upon as wide a basis of morphological and physiological facts as possible, and one in which place is found for all observational and experimental data relating, even if indirectly, to the constitution, subdivision, origin, and behavior of species and other taxonomic groups. Ideals can, it may be said, never be completely realized. They have, however, a great value of acting as permanent stimulants, and if we have some, even vague, ideal of an omega taxonomy, we may progress a little way down the Greek alphabet. Some of us please ourselves by thinking we are now groping in a beta taxonomy. Tyrrell thus explicitly excludes from alpha taxonomy various areas of study that he includes within taxonomy as a whole, such as ecology, physiology, genetics, and cytology. He further excludes phylogenetic reconstruction from alpha taxonomy. Later authors have used the term in a different sense to mean the delimitation of species, not subspecies or taxa or other ranks, using whether Investigative techniques are available and including sophisticated computational or laboratory techniques. Thus, Ernst Mayr in 1968 defined beta taxonomy as a classification of ranks higher than species. An understanding of the biological meaning of variation and of the evolutionary origin of groups of related species is even more important for the second stage of taxonomic activity, the sorting of species into groups of relatives and their arrangement in a hierarchy of higher categories. This activity is what the term classification denotes. It is also referred to as beta taxonomy. I gotta just scroll down to maybe this. This is interesting. So the history. Of course, there is a modern history with the science, but there are also the ancient taxonomy, right? So let's see. Pre-Linnaean. Naming and classification human surroundings likely began with the onset of language. Distinguishing poisonous plants from edible plants is integral to the survival of human communities. Medicinal plant illustrations show up in Egyptian wall paintings from 1500 BC, indicating that the uses of different species were understood and that a basic taxonomy was in place. A language is a structured system of communication used by humans. Languages can be based on speech and gesture, sign, or writing. The structure of language is its grammar, and the free components are its vocabulary. Many languages, including the most widely spoken ones, have writing script. A community is a social unit with commonality such as norms, religion, values, customs, or identity. Communities may share a sense of place situated in a given geographical area or in virtual space through communication platforms. Cool. So let's see how ancient times used to classify. Organisms were first classified by Aristotle during his stay on the island of Lesbos. He classified beings by their parts, or in modern terms, attributes, such as having live birth, having four legs, laying eggs, having blood, or being warm bodied. He divided all living things into two groups, plants and animals. Some of his groups of animals, such as Anhyma, which means animals without bloods, translated as invertebrates, and Enhyma, which means animals with blood, roughly the vertebrates, as well as groups like the sharks and cetaceans, are still commonly used today. His student Theophrastus carried on his tradition, mentioning some 500 plants and their uses in his Historia Plantarum. Again, several plant groups currently still recognized can be traced back to Theophrastus, such as Cornus, Crocus, and Narcissus. Cool. Aristotle's biology is the theory of biology grounded in systematic observation and collection of data, mainly zoological, embodied in Aristotle's books on the science. Many of his observations were made during his stay on the island of Lesbos, including especially his description of the marine life. Lesbos or Lesvos is a Greek island located in the northeastern Aegean Sea, often called Mytilene in Greece, after its capital. It has an area of 1,633 square kilometers with 321 kilometers of coastline, making it the third largest island in Greece. It is separated from Turkey by the narrow river, maybe? No. It's an island, it's a narrow sea. Invertebrates are animals that neither possess nor develop a vertebral column, derived from the notochord. This includes all animals apart from the chordate subphylum Vertebrata. Familiar examples of invertebrates include arthropods, mollusks, annelid, and cnidarians. Vertebrates comprise all species of animals within the subphylum Vertebrata, including all mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Vertebrates represent the overwhelming majority of phylum Chordata, with currently about 69,963 species described. We actually learned about this in one of the very first random Wikipedia article. I don't know what to call it. Sharks are a group of elasmobranch fish characterized by a cartilaginous skeleton, 5 to 7 gill slits on the sides of the head, and pectoral fins that are not fused to the head. Modern sharks are classified within the clade Silachimorpha and are the sister group to the rays. Cetaceans are the aquatic mammals constituting the infraorder Cetacea, including whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Key characteristics are their fully aquatic lifestyle, streamlined body shape, often large size, and exclusively carnivorous diet. Exclusively carnivorous diet? I thought a lot of whales were herbivores. Okay. So that's how they used to classify um, back in ancient Greece. Theophrastus, a Greek native of Erissos in Lesbos, was the successor to Aristotle in the peripatetic peripatetic school. His given name was Tyrtamus. His nickname was given by Aristotle, his teacher, for his divine style of expression. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and polymath during the classical period in ancient Greece. Taught by Plato, he was the founder of the Lyceum, the peripatetic school of philosophy, and the Aristotelian tradition. His writings cover many subjects, including physics, biology, etc. Theophrastus's inquiry into plants, or Historia Plantarum, was, along with his mentor Aristotle's History of Animals, Pliny the Elder's Natural History, and Dioscorides' De Materia Medica, one of the most important books of natural history written in ancient times. Cornus is a genus of about 30 to 60 species of woody plants in the family Cornuaceae. commonly known as dogwoods, which can generally be distinguished by their blossoms, berries, and distinctive bark. Most are deciduous trees or scrubs, but a few species are nearly herbaceous perennial. Crocus is a genus of seasonal flowering plants in the family Iridaceae, comprising about 100 species of perennials growing from corms. They are low growing plants whose flower stems remain underground, that bear relatively large white, yellow, orange, or purple flowers and then become dormant. Narcissus is a genus of predominantly spring flowering perennial plants of the Amaryllis family. Amaryllidaceae. uh, Various common names include daffodil, narcissus, and jonquil are used to describe all or some members of the genus. All right, so this is interesting. So first is life, and then domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and last is the species. So let's see. Well, before Linnaeus, plants and animals were considered separate kingdoms. Linnaeus used this as the top rank, dividing the physical world into the vertebrates. uh, Dividing the physical world into the vegetable, animal, and mineral kingdoms. As advances in microscopy made classifications of microorganisms possible, the number of kingdoms increased, five and six kingdom system being the most common. Domains are a relatively new grouping, first proposed in 1977. Carl Woolsey three domain system was not generally accepted until later. One main characteristic of the three domain method is the separation of archaea and bacteria, previously grouped into the single kingdom bacteria, which is a kingdom also sometimes called Monera, with the eukaryotic for all organisms whose cell contains a nucleus. A small number of scientists include a sixth kingdom, archaea, but do not accept the domain method. Thomas Cavalier Smith, who published extensively on the classification of protists recently, and it's like when, uh, proposed that the Neomura, the clade that groups together the archaea and eukarya, would have evolved from bacteria, more precisely from actinobacteria. His 2004 classification treated the archaeobacteria as part of a subkingdom of the kingdom bacteria. That is, he rejected the three domain system entirely. Stephen Luceta in 2012 proposed a five dominion system, adding prionobiota, which are acellular and without nucleic acid, and virusobiota, which are acellular but with nuclear acid, to the traditional three domains. The two kingdoms would be the vegetables and I mean plants and animals. With three, it's okay. All of okay. Then there were two empires and four kingdoms: Monera, plant, animal, Protostisa. Protostista. Then it became five, then three domains, then two empires and six kingdoms. And now it's two empire and seven kingdoms. Okay. Plants are predominantly photosynthetic eukaryotes of the kingdom Plantae. Historically, the plant kingdom encompasses all living things that were not animals and included algae and fungi. However, all current definitions of Plantae exclude the fungi and some algae. A protist is any eukaryotic organism that is not an animal, plant, or fungus. While it is likely that protists share a common ancestor, the exclusion of other eukaryotes means that protists do not form a natural group or clade. Therefore, some protists may be more closely related to animals than plants, I believe. Okay, let's check out what's going on in right now, right? So we got bacteria. Bacteria are ubiquitous. Bacteria are ubiquitous, mostly free living organisms, often consisting of one biological cell. They constitute a large domain of prokaryotic microorganisms, typically a few micrometers in length. Bacteria were among the first life forms to appear on Earth and are present in the most. Sorry, I had to mute because I had to cough. Archaea constitute a domain of single celled organisms. These microorganisms lack cell nuclei and are therefore prokaryotes. Archaea were initially classified as bacteria, receiving the name Archaeobacteria, but this term has fallen out of use. So bacteria have nuclei. It consists of one biological cell. And archaea are also single cell but lack cell nuclei. Protozoa is an informal term for a group of single celled eukaryotes, either free living or parasitic, that feed on organic matter such as other microorganisms or organic tissues and debris. Historically, protozoans were regarded as one celled animals because they often possess animal like characteristics. Chromista is a biological kingdom consisting of a single celled and multicellular eukaryotic species that share similar features in their photosynthetic organelles, which is plastids. It includes all protists whose plastids contain chlorophyll, such as some algae, diatoms, oomycetes, and protozoans. And then we have Plantae and Animalia, and my favorite, fungi. A fungus is any member of the group of eukaryotic organisms that include microorganisms such as yeast and molds, as well as the more familiar mushrooms. These organisms are classified as a kingdom separately from the other eukaryotic kingdoms, which by one traditional classification were the same or something. It's interesting, right? Like how we had like a different classification. I mean, it makes sense because we, being humans, are uh, pretty logical and pretty need that classification to construct a pattern of the general things around us, and that's why I feel that every person act from this base foundation of mapping, like brain mapping from one point to the other point. And we use the classification to kind of make it more official, obviously, because I'm sure you have your own classification in your mind when you deal with, like, different circumstances, like whether it's uh, I bet you have your classifications, like your family versus your coworkers versus your friends versus someone else, and depending on your um, relationship with that particular classification, you may end up acting differently, right? For example, if you meet a new person, like a stranger, and you don't know if you should classify them as your family, right? Because, I mean, unless they are like blood relative, or if they're like married into your family. Those are the only two ways to classify them as a family, right? But if that's not the case, then you won't classify them as family. Then you probably gonna check it out if you want to classify them as friend, or maybe to see if they have like the similar, say, business acumen, and you want to start some sort of business partnership with them. And then those would be classified into more of a professional classification. So we would do that in our day-to-day life, and we do all of this subconsciously to a certain degree, right? And but uh, the science, the concepts of any particular um, topic, for example, right? Like the concept of that topic, and how you break down that topic into multiple layers by creating foundation and classifying different aspects of that one topic. And then that classifications help you to kind of like trace back different characteristics of that topic, and you can go from there. So we it's built in within us, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's built in within the entire living forms, right? Because I'm sure at the very base level, most of the animals as well as plants would have two classifications, right? Like predators and prey, or food and predators. So that would be the two basic classification every life being would would understand or classify. I bet the way they communicate with that classification would be different. I mean, if you're say if you're an animal, and or even maybe let's just say microorganisms, right? Then you would consume a specific type of food, and that's a chemical language you as a being would be leveraging to interact with the food. Uh, and we do that as a complex multicellular organism as well. We use a lot of chemical language when we are interacting with different people or different situations. I mean, that chemical language, sometimes I would say external, and sometimes it's internal. You know what I mean? Like if you're scared, if you're at some place, and if you're scared and you started sweating, that sweat, the smell of sweat, that's more like external character, right? Likewise, like if you you know if you've been through different environment, right, and 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 sort of absorb the smell of those environments. Like for example, if you're cooking and then if you're in the kitchen for a long time, or probably the better example would be if you say go to a bar and if people around you are smoking, because if it's a smoking bar, then your clothes smell like cigarette, and I hate when that happens. Um, but that is an external chemical, right? The smell of the cigarette, which anyone around me would be able to smell from my clothes. So that's an external chemical, whereas the internal chemical would be the one which which my brain and body are sort of creating, like hormones, different hormones or different emotional responses based on different situations, and all of those are kind of like internal um, chemicals, right? So we are constantly using different chemicals to, or the language of chemical, to interact with the world, either internally or externally, and that's why I I feel that the reality itself is complex, obviously, but at the same time, once we kind of start dissecting the layer of these complexity, we can find a lot of like simplistic things which sort of create these ripple effect and make reality more complex, if that makes sense. Uh, and yeah, I don't have um, any other way to go from there. But I do want to kind of check out this open tree of life. Also, these are all online classification, I think. So the recent comprehensive classifications, partial classifications exist for many individual groups of organisms and are revised and replaced as new information becomes available. However, comprehensive published treatments of most or all life are rarer. Recent examples are that of ADL 2012 and 2019, which covers eukaryotes only with an emphasis on protist. And okay, well, a separate compilation covers extant taxa to the rank of family. Other database driven treatments include the Encyclopedia of Life, uh, Global Biodiversity Information Facility, the NCBI Taxonomy Database, the Interim Register of Marine and Non Marine Genera, the Open Tree of Life, and the Catalog of Life. The Paleo- Paleobiology Database is a resource for fossils. These are all kind of interesting, right? The Encyclopedia of Life is a free online encyclopedia intended to document all of the 1.9 million living species known to science. It is compiled from existing trusted databases curated by experts and with the assistance of non experts throughout the world. The Global Biodiversity Information Facility is an international organization that focuses on making scientific data on biodiversity available via the internet using web services. The data are provided by many institutions from around the world. The National Center for Biotechnology Information is part of the United States National Library of Medicine, a branch of the National Institutes of Health. It is approved and funded by the government of the United States. The Interim Register of Marine and Non-Marine Genera is a taxonomic database which attempts to cover published genus names for all domains of life from 1758 in zoology up to the present, arranged in a single, internally consistent taxonomic hierarchy for the benefit of biodiversity. The Open Tree of Life is an online Phylogenetic Tree of Life, a collaborative effort funded by the National Science Foundation. The first draft include 2.3 million species was released in September 2015. The interactive graph allows the user to zoom into taxonomic classifications. The Catalog of Life is an online database that provides an index of known species of animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms. It was created in 2001 as a partnership between the Global Species 2000 and the American Integrated Taxonomic Information System. The Paleobiology database is an online resource for information on the distribution and classification of fossil animals, plants, and microorganisms. Kind of like all of this. Let's check out Encyclopedia of Life. So are these like just the random animals? Clathrus archieri, also known as octopus stinkhorn, is a species of fungi in the family Fallaceae. Fallaceae. Wow. Microsporidian parasites. It's a phylum of fungi. There are 1,207 species of Microsporidian parasites. Okay, let's check this one over here. Kind of slow, if you ask me. Very slow. Let's see this Open Tree of Life. This GBIF is taking forever. Okay. So this is the tree of life, well, or classification. So these are cellular organisms. They're like bacteria, eukaryotic, I mean, where in the world are we? Probably have to. Do you have to like click on this to expand? Let's see, catalog of life. Okay, so kingdom Animalia, and then oh, look at here, GBIF. It is, what is ITIS? Integrated Taxonomic Information System, which is probably one of here, right? No, 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 no. Okay. Species 2000. And paleobiology. How can I go to their website? Anyhow, all right. I think I should wrap up soon, so I'm gonna check out like one more page and then we're gonna call it a day. Wait, the initial description of a taxon involved five main requirements. The taxon must be given a name based on the 26th letter of the Latin alphabet, a binomial for new species, or uninominal for other ranks. The name must be unique, that is not homonym. The description must be based on at least one name-bearing type specimen. It should include statements about appropriate attributes either to describe or define the taxon or to differentiate it from other taxa. Both codes deliberately separate defining the content of a taxon from defining its name. These first four requirements must be published in a work that is obtainable in numerous identical copies as a permanent scientific record. Cool. Let's check out what is phonetics. Wait. No, not this one. Where did it go? I was kind of curious about, yeah, systematics. All right. Biological systematics is a study of the diversification of living forms, both past and present, and the relationships among living things through time. Relationships are visualized as evolutionary tree, synonymous cladograms, phylogenetic trees, phylogenesis. Phylogenesis have two components: branching order, showing group relationships, and branch length, showing amount of evolution. Phylogenetic trees of species and higher taxa are used to study the evolution of traits. Example, anatomical or molecular characteristics, and the distribution of organisms, which is biogeography. Systematics, in other words, is used to understand the evolutionary history of life on Earth. The word systematics is derived from Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of organisms. Carl Linnaeus used Systema Naturae, as the title of his book. A cladogram is a diagram used in cladistics. A cladogram is a diagram used in cladistics to show relations among organisms. A cladogram is not, however, an evolutionary tree because it does not show how ancestors are related to descendants, nor does it show how much they have changed. So many differing evolutionary trees can be consistent or something. A phylogenetic tree is a branching diagram or a tree showing the evolutionary relationships among various biological species or other entities based upon similarities and differences in their physical or genetic characteristics. All life on Earth is part of a single phylogenetic tree. I think we already went through that, but biogeography is the study of the distribution of species and ecosystems in geographic space and through geological time. Organisms and biological communities often vary in a regular fashion along geographic gradients of latitude, evolution, isolation, and habitat area. Cool. All right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, how we classify uh, pretty much the entire life, and this classification have helped us to understand the diversity within the nature, and also understand what's our role is. To a certain degree, we are one of the species among like hundreds of thousands or millions of species, right? And we control the entire planet. So, technically speaking, humans are the 1% of the species. And we can see how much we are affecting the nature altogether, right? We are putting a toll on the ecosystems and affecting the biodiversity or the whole um, ecoculture of that area, right? And that create a ripple effect, and it affect something else, which affects something else, and eventually it affect us too. Maybe in different degree, but everything we put out does affect us. And if we choose to ignore that, then it becomes sort of like a uh, like a stack. All the effects are stacked together and piled on top of each other and become sort of catastrophic, like the climate crisis we are experiencing right now. And that's the that's the interesting part of the nature, right? Like everything is connected to such a greater degree. I mean, sure, individuals when they say do wrong thing, or when they kill or die, generally speaking, every animal goes through that, and that individual's action may or may not impact their community or their group, let alone the entire planet. But the collective action of species can impact and have been impacting the ecosystem and the overall planet of and it's been happening forever. So it's not a new thing. It's just about the degree, right? Again, like I said, I believe humans are the 1% when it comes down to species, and we are exploiting so much of the natural resource, and some of it is, sort of understandable, meaning, the human population have crossed over 7 billion, and all of those 7 billion people need a lot of resources. So the only way to sort of mine those resources would be from the nature, and that will automatically put a toll on the nature. So that is sort of understandable, even though I don't I feel that we should do a better job at self-modulating the population. I'm not in a favor, or never will be in a favor of government, imposing that on the people. But I do feel that the institutes which corrupt our thinking, such as the religious institute, which prevent people from using contraceptive methods to kind of plan their family instead of, like, being surprised by it, I guess. So I feel those institutes are the one which are doing more damage than helping out. On the other end, if people have like a more planned family, then not only the the future of their their children would be more secure, because they will have kids when they are ready, right? And on top of that, when that will also help out with the resources across the world, but provided every family, every person does it, so which is sort of impossible. So uh, I'm I'm not sure what's the solution to and to be honest, there is no one part solution to all the global crises we are having. For every different sector, for say, when you call it food industry, health industry, call it industry, or call it, like, when it comes down to having the basic amenities in your life to be able to at least live with dignity, like having the basic needs met. And that also means people taking responsibility of their life, and actually, doing thing. And there always um, will be systems in place, or you know or circumstances in place which will be opposing us, which will be against us. And I think that's fair to call it out. When if the system is unfair to you, it's fair to call it out. But if that becomes an excuse to not take an action, then uh, it's disadvantageous, right? Then it's not helping, and also not just not helping, but also harming. So I think it goes both ways. Like, you would have to take personal responsibility, and at the same time call out the unfair system, especially if the system is unfair towards you. Um, and I think that is the healthy balance, to have both side of it, and also, you know, uh, not feel helpless, because if you know that everything is against you, if the system is against you, and not just say more recent, but historically being against you, right? Then that create a sense of helplessness, and I've experienced that. I've still experienced that in like few areas of my life, and then at times I have to kind of remind myself that, sure, if even if the systems are unfair towards me, I still have to keep moving and putting in the work, and just not play with the rules of the system per se, but unless I have no option. To give you an example, like I'm an immigrant here, right? So I have to play with the rules of the system, and that's not an option because I have to play with the immigration system as per their requirement, and follow those through. But there are other systems which doesn't impact me as much or at all. For example, there are rules for I don't know. Let's just say fishing, right? There are rules of fishing based on the fishing migration pattern, I guess, and the amount of fishes or a different type or species of fishes in a particular pond or something. So they have like different licenses for that. And even if those licenses are say unfair for any reason towards me, I don't think it is. But if those are unfair towards me, I don't care a bit because I don't even like to. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't bother to me because it's not part of something which I'm gonna do. But also, if there are something, some system which you have to engage in, maybe like say health insurance, right? No matter how much it frustrates me to kind of to see how I'm overpaying for health insurance. If it were like say a Medicare for all, that would have helped everyone, not just people who are paying insurance per se, but also people who cannot afford insurance. And on top of that, it will make things simpler and easier for everyone, and people won't be stressed out to go to doctor, which I am too. Even though I have good insurance, I don't know why I'm stressed out, but maybe that's part of like my underlying pattern. But the point being that having healthcare for all will be beneficial to all, right? And I know that I'm part of the system and I can't do anything about it. And the one way to look at it is like feeling hopeless that I'm a victim, I can't do anything. But the other way of that is empowering yourself and just saying, okay, this it is what it is, but this health insurance shouldn't stop me from um, being healthy or staying healthy. So health insurance is not a replacement for health, right? So regardless of my health insurance status, I still have to make sure that my health is in check, and take all the precautions I need to if I feel it in that time. So the point being that there are always going to be systems or situations which would be say unfair or against you, and it's it's okay to call them out, but not being trapped or not being not feeling powerless because of those things. And again, it varies from person to person and situation to situation. So um, who am I to judge any of that? But that I try to use that as my philosophy so that I can remain more peaceful from inside, and just by accepting the things as they are, and only able to do what I could do, and not being annoyed and frustrated at the entire world for not doing what they're supposed to do or what they should do according to me, um, and not doing all of that, and just surrendering, and just looking at the thing as they are, and taking the best course of action makes me feel more peaceful from within. And I hope you guys have a pretty peaceful day as well. Until next time,